Somebody stole my cupcakes. Let's get after it. One of the big pieces of evidence we have here is this note. Now this note was written in black ink. Now I happen to know that black ink is actually a whole bunch of different inks put together in order to make black. There's other colors in there. So today, what I want to do is I want to figure out how these other colors work. So I tried to think about what are some things I know of that have different colors of ink in them, so that I can set up an investigation to kind of look at the properties of these different colors. So the one thing I actually found two things, but my favorite thing that has different colors of ink in it are M&Ms. Now, you're going to need a bag of M&Ms for this experiment. Some of you might be allergic to peanuts, those kinds of things. I've got regular M&Ms, but still, I think M&Ms are made in a factory with peanuts. If you can't use M&Ms, Skittles work just as well. So you're going to need either a package of M&Ms or a package of Skittles. You're also going to need some kind of a plate. You can use a regular plate like you would have at your house, but it has to have a little bit of edges on it. It's also nice if there's nothing drawn on the plate, if it's kind of as plain as possible. It doesn't really matter. You'll see later why that's important. You're also going to need something to measure with. If we're doing an experiment, we're going to have some data. So I've got several things here that you can use around the house in order to measure. I've got a tape measure. If you have one of those around the house, those work really well. I actually have this tiny little tape measure that we use for sewing. This actually has centimeters in it, which is nice. It doesn't matter if you have centimeters or inches for today's activity. You just need something to measure. I've also got a ruler. This is probably what I will use in order to measure, is just a ruler. It has centimeters and inches on it. But if you don't have any of these things, you can use something as simple as some lined paper. We can use the lines as a measuring device. How many lines long is it? Okay? So go ahead, gather some of these materials. I also have some paper towels. I'm going to need some paper towels. And I have some water. I filled this kind of canister with some water. So these are the things that you're going to need. Go ahead, gather some of these materials, and I'll kind of show you how to get started. All right, the hardest part about this experiment actually is not eating all the M&Ms. We're actually going to use these M&Ms for a couple of experiments. So the hardest part is going to be making sure that you don't eat all of them after the first day, or you'll end up buying more. So here's how this experiment works. It's very easy. I'm going to take some water, and I'm going to pour just a little bit into this bowl. In fact, I'm going to pour just enough that there's a small layer of water inside the bowl. So as small as I can, just so that there is a layer of water that covers the bowl. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to place an M&M in the middle. Now, do this and see what happens. One of the things that I'm interested in is, do the different colors move at the same rate? do the different colors spread out the same way? What if I dropped a green M&M in water, or a orange, or a blue, or a yellow? What are these M&Ms? Do the dyes all act the same? So what we're going to do today is we're going to set up an experiment to try to figure out, can we gather evidence to support a claim about which dyes move faster, slower, or if they all move at the same rate. So let's think about how we're going to set up this experiment. The one thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to control some variables. Some of the things need to be the same whenever you set up an experiment. So a couple of things we need to do every single time the same way. We're probably going to need the same amount of water. Okay, so very close. We don't need to measure it, but just enough to cover the edge of this, because I got to get rid of this water for my next trial. Okay, so I'll dump this out and just pour more water in. So we're going to try and keep the same amount of water. Let's also try to put the M&M directly in the middle every single time. And then, once it's done spreading, we need to figure out how we're going to measure it. Do we want to measure in centimeters? Do we want to measure in inches? It really doesn't matter. Typically scientists use centimeters, but if all you have is an inch, it's fine. Then, one of the more important things is, how are you going to measure? Are you going to measure from the middle of the M&M to the farthest spot out? Are you going to measure across the whole circle of color? Or are you going to measure certain spots? You have to measure kind of the same way every time. So in your experiment, you need to pick how you want to measure this. Do you want to go from the center of the M&M to the far? Because in mine, it wasn't a perfect circle. Mine kind of had this little jet, like a little triangle. So am I going to measure to the farthest spot, the closest spot? Or do I want to measure across the whole thing? You need to decide how you want to do that in your experiment. So the last thing we need to think about is, how much time are we going to give it to do this? Right now, my bowl is completely red. It is spread out through the entire bowl. I also bumped the bowl a little bit, which was not good at all. If you bump the water, it's going to actually wavy up and spread that stuff out. We don't want that either. So we have to be sure that we don't bump the bowl, and we have to measure after the same amount of time every time. 1 minute's probably a good idea. So you're probably going to want a cell phone or some kind of a stopwatch where you can measure 1 minute. So how are we going to set up this experiment? We are going to take a bowl, an empty bowl, just like this. We're going to pour a little bit of water in, and we're going to pick a color. We're going to pick red, maybe. We're going to put the red one in there. Then you're going to wait 1 minute, time exactly 1 minute. And after 1 minute, you've got to grab your ruler, and you're going to measure how big that spread has gone. Now, I wonder if every red M&M is the same, or if the different M&Ms are different. To figure that out, we're going to need to do more than one red M&M. Let's do 3. If we do 3 red M&Ms, we should be able to figure about the average on how far it's spread. If I bump the bowl or do something crazy like that, I don't want to even bother measuring that because I screwed up the experiment. So I drop an M&M, wait a minute, and then measure. Then I'm going to want to do the same thing with blue M&Ms, and the same thing with orange or yellow or green, and see if we can't come up with enough data in order to figure out, do the colors change their speeds? Is the speed of the dye moving through there different depending upon color? So this is kind of a big experiment, but it doesn't take very long, because you drop an M&M, and then you wait, and then you measure. Then you drop another, get new water, wait, measure, drop another M&M. You can take data fairly fast. On your worksheet, there is actually a data table that I started. I think I put a couple of colors on there. You don't have to use those colors if you want, but I want you to do several colors so that you can determine whether or not the different colors spread faster or slower. So in the end, remember, you're going to make a claim about what colors you think go faster, slower, or if they all go the same speed. And that claim has to be based on evidence. It has to be based on the data that you take in your lab. So be very careful in how you do this using either M&Ms or Skittles, how you measure, don't bump things, and try to get some really good data to make some conclusions. This isn't the end of what we're going to do with this. We're actually going to come back in a couple of episodes and look at some other variables that we can do with the same setup. So don't eat all your M&Ms. I'll see you next time where we can do some really cool stuff with M&Ms and water.